5:17 a.m., a 600-meter-long train carrying 2.7 million liters of fuel and dozens of weapons containers, the lifeblood fueling Russia's campaign, is hurtling through the mist. Above, a Russian UAV glides across the sky. On the ground, 3 Ukrainian soldiers have only 90 seconds before being locked on by radar. When the Flamingo missile leaves its launcher, the dawn sky will turn into a sea of fire. Comment with the number 1 to find out if a $400,000 weapon can destroy a steel train worth hundreds of millions of dollars and turn the entire battlefield upside down. In that moment, no one on the train knew they were passing over an invisible minefield. The first rays of dawn illuminated only steel and fuel, not the plane hidden deep underground, because this was not just a reckless attack, but a move that could paralyze the entire campaign. And the weapon about to be launched was something the world had never heard of. On military maps, the Tokmak railway line is not just tens of kilometers of soulless steel. It is the main artery pumping blood to the entire Zaporizhia campaign. Every turn of the wheels on the tracks means thousands of Russian soldiers are resupplied. Hundreds of T-90M tanks and SDS self-propelled guns are refueled to continue crushing the Ukrainian defense lines. This morning, that heartbeat was stronger than ever. The train that day was over 600 meters long, carrying 2.7 million liters of jet fuel, enough for 1,500 Su-34 sorties, or to supply an armored brigade for days of combat. Not just fuel, 20 sealed steel containers also held 152mm artillery shells, tank rounds, and dozens of electronic warfare devices. Russia believed this train was invulnerable, protected by a living shield. An Orlan 10 reconnaissance drone circled the sky. Radar scanned continuously, and an armored car at the rear carried a 23mm cannon, an AGS-17 grenade launcher, and a D-30 howitzer ready to fire. But in the cold darkness underground, a few kilometers from the tracks, 3 Ukrainian soldiers faced a tense silence. Before them was a mobile launcher containing Flamingo, a Ukrainian-made weapon never before revealed to the world. It was 6.22 meters long, weighed 1.4 tons, with a 200-kilogram warhead containing enough RDX explosive to penetrate 2-centimeter thick steel. It flew low, just 30 meters above the ground, hugging the terrain with a terrain sensor combined with GPS-INS, rendering Russian radar almost blind. The cost of one Flamingo was only about $400,000, unbelievably cheap compared to the damage it was about to inflict. This bold plan was no accident. 3 days ago, Russia launched missiles at the Kramatorsk station, killing dozens of civilians. Tonight, Ukraine responded, not just for revenge, but to send a message. We are not waiting for aid. We create our own strength. In the bunker, the countdown clock showed 90 seconds. The commander whispered, "One shot shakes the whole battlefield." But no one expected that beyond the mist, Russia still had an ace up its sleeve. Would the Flamingo penetrate this steel shield, or would it be torn apart by the storm of bullets awaiting it? Outside, the birch forest was still shrouded in fog. There was only the sound of steel wheels grinding on the tracks in the early morning wind. Underground, in the dark oil-fumed bunker, a red light flashed in the rough concrete wall. The satellite screen displayed a long streak of light. The target train had entered the kill zone. The countdown clock coldly ticked away the seconds, 000130. No one spoke. Only the sound of the ventilation fan mixed with the pounding of hearts. The commander finally nodded, his hoarse voice cutting through the vibrations from the ground. Fire. The launcher shuddered violently. A blast of hot gas erupted, tearing through the darkness. The Flamingo shot out of the launch tube like a steel arrow hurtling into the void. An imaginary lens followed the 6.22-meter-long, 1.4-ton projectile, leaving a yellow trail of fire in the fog. Its control fins vibrated slightly, locking onto the target with its GPS-INS system, combined with a terrain sensor. It flew close to the ground, only 30 meters high, following the riverbank, gliding under the canopy of trees, leaving Russian radar completely blind. On the train, the Russian soldiers still didn't understand what was happening. They were still checking container straps, still hearing the monotonous train whistle. Then suddenly from the east, a sound cut through the wind. Not loud enough to be an alarm, but enough to make a sergeant look up. The next moment, hell opened its gates. The Flamingo slammed directly into car number 3, which was filled with jet fuel. The explosion tore the sky apart, causing the air to condense and detonate into a giant fireball. The brilliant red light illuminated the entire forest, turning the fog into a sea of blood. The column of fire rose over 100 meters, engulfing the train and the soldiers standing nearby. The shockwaves swept through, tossing trucks around like dry leaves, causing the windows of a fuel depot 500 meters away to shatter like a rain of glass bullets. The fire didn't stop. Cars number 4 and 5 burned fiercely. Black oil spread, turning the tracks into a kilometer-long river of fire. A container of 152mm artillery shells exploded in succession, sending steel fragments raining down on the forest like a shower of knives. The sound echoed like rolling thunder, mixed with the twisting of steel and the screams of men in the smoke. One shot shook the battlefield. If you believe courage is always worth mentioning, leave a like right now. Inside the bunker, the screen was filled with static. 2 soldiers clasped their hands together. The Flamingo had hit the heart of the target. But before they could celebrate, a strange signal flashed. A red dot moved from the northwest, accelerating. The commander glanced at the secondary radar screen, his face pale. "It's coming," he choked out. What nightmare was approaching, and would Ukraine have time to launch a second strike before hell counterattacked? A few seconds after the first explosion, the birch forest seemed peaceful. The pale dawn light shone through a thin layer of smoke, as if the earth had just sighed after a loud noise. But beneath the smoke, hell was erupting. The flames engulfed car number 3, turning the jet fuel into a second bomb. The intense heat softened the steel like wax. 2.7 million liters of compressed fuel in the tanks exploded, spewing towering columns of fire that reached the low clouds. Cars number 4 and 5 burned fiercely, creating a terrifying domino effect. Each explosion pushed pressure onto the adjacent cars, turning them into giant artillery shells ready to detonate. The sound was incessant. Each blast was like a hammer blow to the ground. Steel fragments flew at speeds over 800 meters per second, piercing truck bodies and embedding themselves in trees as thick as a man's hand. A container of 152mm artillery shells exploded, creating a rain of metal that fell on the forest like fiery spears. A cinematic scene unfolded. The long railway track twisted like a steel snake in a sea of fire. The steel bent like candy and black smoke billowed into the sky, mixing with the smell of burning oil and explosives. From above, a Russian UAV's camera sent back images that left the command center speechless for a few seconds. A supply line worth hundreds of millions of dollars was burning like a strategic torch. Russian soldiers panicked, many running from their shelters, only to be blown away by a second shockwave. Armored vehicles parked alongside were engulfed in flames, their tires exploding like mortar rounds. In the bunker, the 3 Ukrainian soldiers held their breath, watching the screen. It was confirmed. The commander's hoarse voice cut through the alarm, but the joy was short-lived. The tactical radar detected a large high-speed signal from the northwest. Not a UAV, not a truck. It was a Russian armored vehicle, a mobile fortress, charging into the heart of the inferno, ready to counterattack. As the first track of the Russian fortress crushed the warped railway, the battle was no longer a raid. It had become a storm of steel. If you were the Russian commander in this situation, what would you do to save the train? Share your strategy in the comments, and guess whether Russia's counterattack is enough to turn the tide. The final explosion from the 5th car had not yet ended when the sky was suddenly lit by a new fire. Not from the fuel depot, but from the 23mm automatic cannon firing. The Russian armored car had awakened. Red tracer rounds tore through the fog like streaks of fire hurtling through the air at nearly 1,000 meters per second, hitting the ground, then creating a series of bright sparks. The deafening roar echoed, overpowering the explosions from the railway. From behind the train, the armored vehicle, nicknamed the Mobile Fortress, emerged from smoke and fired its guns, spewing a storm of bullets. More than 2,000 rounds were fired in 1 minute, turning the space ahead into a deadly steel net. The red tracers were like hot swords slashing through the air. The EGS-17 fired grenades continuously, creating a series of small explosions, interspersed with the ground-shaking thud of heavy artillery rounds from the D-30. The sound became chaotic, the clang of bullets hitting armor, the wail of alarms in the command car, the screams of Russian soldiers mixed with the twisting of steel. Pieces of armor flew up, spinning in the air, before falling into the hot ash with a metallic clink. The smoke billowed into a thick black column as high as a 30-story building, obscuring the dim light of dawn. A Russian drone circled, transmitting unbelievable images. The kilometer-long railway was now just a winding river of fire. The steel melted like plastic. A few hundred meters away, 2 Ukrainian soldiers leaned against the damp concrete wall in the bunker, listening to metal fragments hitting the blast door like hail. Only 2 Flamingo missiles remained in the launcher. They knew if they didn't fire now, Russian radar would lock on and artillery would level their base in minutes. A trembling hand rested on the control stick, sweat dripping onto the cold earth floor. 2 rounds left. Would they be enough to tear through this steel storm, or would they be swallowed by the inferno Russia had just unleashed? Dust rained down from the concrete ceiling, falling continuously with each massive explosion from outside. The bunker shook, the shriek of metal mixing with the sound of D-30 artillery shells pounding the ground like a storm of hammers. A bright red countdown clock flashed on the screen. Russian radar had only 60 seconds to lock onto their coordinates. After that, this entire bunker would be turned to dust. The commander gripped the radio, the blood draining from his white knuckles. The alarm echoed off the thick walls like a demon's scream. He looked up, his eyes as sharp as a blade. Fire everything. Fire it all. The launcher roared like an enraged beast. Flames erupted, pushing hot gas that filled the vents. The second Flamingo shot out of the bunker like an arrow from hell, leaving a red glow in the fog. It skimmed the treetops, hugging every contour of the land, using its terrain sensor and INS navigation system to adjust its trajectory in deadly silence. Just 45 seconds later, the image from the UAV was horrifying to behold. A fuel tank in the middle of the train exploded. A flash of lightning ripped across the sky. A fireball shot straight up over 150 meters, engulfing the entire train like a ferocious predator. The temperature exceeded 1,500 degrees Celsius, enough to bend steel like wax. Oil spilled onto the tracks, burning into a river of fire nearly a kilometer long, obscuring the UAV's vision. It wasn't just one explosion, but a series of them, a domino effect, tearing apart adjacent cars, spewing sparks like deadly fireworks. In that moment, the Russian 23mm cannon was still firing wildly, tearing through the fog with brilliant red tracers. But that roar lasted only a few final seconds. The third Flamingo. The final fateful shot left the launcher with a piercing shriek, cutting through the wall of black smoke and locking onto its target, the armored command car, where the order to counterattack still echoed amid the sound of gunfire. The impact was like a cold, calculated strike. The 200-kilogram RDX warhead pierced straight into the control cabin, then detonated in an eerie silence before the actual explosion, thunder. The 20mm thick armor shattered like an eggshell. The cannon was ripped from its mount, spinning wildly before crashing onto the red-hot steel deck. The automatic cannon fell silent. The flames engulfed the space, extinguishing its rage with a single blow. From the UAV's perspective, the entire Tokmak Railway was now just a swirling red glow, emitting a massive column of black smoke, like a tornado piercing the clouds. Amid the ashes, what Russia called a mobile fortress was now just a twisted wreck, leaning against the smoldering train cars. In the bunker, the three Ukrainian soldiers said nothing, their breath mingling with the oil fumes, hands clutching their rifles, as if they still couldn't believe it. The last 2 rounds had not only saved them from the artillery storm, but had also buried Russia's faith in its invulnerable supply line. But the brief silence was broken when the UAV screen flickered. A huge signal blip appeared on the horizon, followed by a long smoke trail and a series of strange, never-before-seen electronic signals. The commander frowned, whispering as if to himself, "What the hell is that?" Just as the smoke and fire seemed to have consumed all secrets, another shadow was approaching, and the battle was not over. If this moment left you breathless, as it did us, share the video so more people can learn about a battle the world has rarely seen. The radar screen flickered continuously as the 3 Ukrainian soldiers held their breath. The mysterious signal blip hurtled toward the battlefield, trailing a long plume of smoke. Everyone tightened their grip on their weapons, preparing for the worst. But a few seconds later, the image from the UAV brought a sigh of relief amid the pent-up tension. It was just a Russian reconnaissance drone circling the sky like a vulture searching for carrion. There was no immediate counterattack, only the smoldering ashes of a once invulnerable supply line. But no immediate counterattack didn't mean Russia had completely lost. The radar still picked up electronic jamming signals, evidence that Moscow was preparing something bigger. The battle wasn't over, but today at Tokmak, the rules of the game had been rewritten. From the UAV's perspective, the kilometer-long railway was now a river of fire. Black smoke swirled upward like giant pillars. Experts estimated that over 2.7 million liters of fuel, dozens of containers of artillery shells, and equipment had been destroyed. Russia would need at least 72 hours to restore the supply line, meaning the entire offensive in Zaporizhia would be halted or even forced to retreat. How much did this attack cost? Less than $400,000. For one Flamingo, a smaller sum than a single Western tank. But it wiped out resources worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That cold number reveals a truth. This is no longer a war of numbers, but a war of intellect and speed. The Flamingo is not just a missile. It's a message: we are not just defending, we can change the game. And that message echoes far enough for the whole world to take notice. In the shadows of modern warfare, true strength lies not in billion-dollar budgets, but in the minds and courage of soldiers in a cold bunker. The Battle of Tokmak may just be the prelude as the technological race on the battlefield truly begins. Thank you for joining us this far. As the smoke over Tokmak has yet to clear, we understand one thing deeply. Every war won or lost leaves a scar on the human heart. Behind the gunfire are soldiers' families waiting for a peaceful dawn. We tell this story not to glorify war, but as a reminder that peace is a priceless gift humanity must preserve. I hope that you, I, and all of us remain vigilant, choosing the path of compassion and humanity so that no one has to trade their youth for blood-soaked land. If you found this video worth spreading, please take a second to like it. Leave a comment with your thoughts and share it with those who cherish independence and freedom, because every share could be a reminder of the value of peace. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the next stories where the secrets of the battlefield are still waiting to be revealed.